お願いします。
はい。皆さん、こんにちは。テーミノロジーです。このシリーズでは、特許用語、表現などをできるだけ分かりやすく解説しています。講師は米国特許弁護士である、ブライアン・エプスタインさんです。お願いします。今回は、英文明細書でアドバンテージやオブジェクト、プリファードといった表現を使うべきかについて見ていきたいと思います。では早速ご解説いただきます。ブライアンさんお願いします。
はい。So we'll begin today by considering preferred embodiments. And there's a lot of material on this slide. So we'll try to take it a little slowly. Historically speaking, designating an embodiment as preferred can achieve three different goals. The first goal is fulfilling the best mode requirement under 35 USC section 112, right? This is a requirement where in order to get a patent, the inventor cannot withhold the best mode for producing the invention. You know, they can't disclose, for example, a slightly less preferred embodiment and claim something that includes their best mode without also disclosing that. The second goal that can be achieved is providing support for narrower ranges, right? This doesn't come up as much in predictable technologies like electronics and mechanical inventions, but it does come up frequently, for example, in unpredictable technologies like biology or chemistry. Pardon me. And so we see an example like, you know, between 1 and 10, and preferably between 5 and 7. And what we're doing there is we're clarifying that, you know, we have support not just for the broader range of 1 to 10, but also between this narrower range of 5 and 7. The other goal that can be achieved is creating a presumption that the claims cover the preferred embodiment. And so in this case, you know, it can be confusing, not necessarily confusing, it can be unclear whether a particular, whether a claim covers an implementation or not. But if we tell the patent office and the courts that, you know, we have this preferred embodiment, then they're more likely to find that the claim covers that preferred embodiment because that's our preference. お願いします。
はい。ここではですね、実施形態をこれプリファードと呼ぶことについての趣旨についてお話しいただきました。で、これは非常に大きなトピックで、本来はスライド1枚にはまとめきれないんですが、非常に簡単に言いますと、この3つのゴールがあると。で、1つ目は112条のベストモード要件を満たすこと。で、2つ目は、主に化学やバイオ分野において、より狭い範囲へのサポートを与えることができると。で、3つ目は、好ましい実施形態がクレームによってカバーされているという推定が起きるということでした。はい、では次に行きたいと思います。ブライアンさん、次お願いします。
Sure. So the question, of course, is should applicants use the phrase preferred? And, you know, I don't know the specific situation of a particular patent application or applicant, but generally speaking, they probably should not use this phrase. So the first issue is that U.S. patents are no longer invalidated under the best mode requirement. The AI, it's still the disclosure of the best mode is still required, but the AIA, the America Invents Act, changed the law so that claims should not be canceled or held invalid or held unenforceable due to the applicant's failure to disclose the best mode. Basically, this had become a big issue in litigations, and people decided that wasn't worth spending judicial resources or punishing patentees for. In addition, again, there is this advantage to using the phrase preferred embodiments as a way to establish narrower ranges in claims. But that same result can be achieved using a different term, such as optionally, right? We don't have to say it's preferred to be between 2 and 7 or whatever the range is. We can just say it's optionally between those. And ultimately, the preference that arises from this optional range is going to be supported by your data anyway, right? It's going to be supported by the experimental data. And so we don't really have to say it's preferred. The data itself will show our preference for it. In addition, the value of a patent isn't necessarily about your preferences, were you or the applicant. It's about the applicant's competitors' preference, the patentee's preferences, patentee's competitors' preferences, sorry. And so what I mean there is that, covering our preferred embodiments is great, except when it's not. And when might that occur? Well, if there's an embodiment that we prefer, that might not be the same embodiment that our competitor prefers, right? Their system's presumably a little bit different. They will have different concerns. They might balance particular aspects or attributes differently. And so what we really want is, our patent to cover their preferences. And if we are covering a different embodiment than our preferred embodiment, a court might interpret our claim broadly enough to cover both of these embodiments, both of our preferred embodiment as well as some other embodiment. And now that the court is interpreting this claim broadly, this could result in the claim being held anticipated or obvious, right? The law changed about 15 years ago in the Helmsdorfer v. Bobrick washroom equipment case. This is a Federal Circuit case from 2008. And we're no longer taking the position that the asserted claims in a patent must cover or should cover the preferred embodiment, right? Helmsdorfer said, well, we'll assume that some of the claims cover the preferred embodiment, but they're not necessarily the ones being asserted in this litigation, which is great as long as your claim has as long as your patent has a good number of claims. If your patent has a lower number of claims, then this concern remains, right? If you only have, 4 claims in a patent, and you're asserting 3 of them in a litigation, well, it's not much work to consider whether or not that 4th one covers your preferred embodiment or not. And it's much more likely that a court will interpret your claim as covering your preferred embodiment, even if that preferred embodiment is not something your competitor is practicing. In fact, I think it's much more likely that they will consider it because your accused infringer will raise this issue, and they'll make it an issue to require the court, or to hopefully, from their point of view, hopefully require the court to consider whether or not the claims cover, both their implementation as well as your preferred embodiment. And by expanding the scope of the claim, again, they can show that your claim is anticipated or obvious. But of course, if you have many claims in your patent, which is common among U.S.-based applicants, right? We tend to file with 20 total claims and 3 independent claims. Then there's more protection available under this Helms-Dürfer case. お願いします。
はい。ここでは、実際にこのプリファードという表現を使うべきなのかについてでした。そして概してプリファードを使わない方がいいということでした。でその理由としてここでは3つ挙げられていまして、1つ目は米国特許はこの AIA 以降ベストモードを理由として無効化されることはないということ。で2つ目は、例えばオプショナリーなどこのプリファードよりも適切な表現があるということ。で3つ目はちょっと長い解説だったんですが、このヘルムズ・デファーという判例が紹介されて、このどの実施形態をプリファードと考えるかというのは、この出願人と同業他社では異なることがあり得るということでした。次に行きたいと思います。お願いします。
So let's consider some related phrases. So the first one is a typical section in Japanese applications entitled Objects of the Invention. This section heading is not required in the US, right? It's very important to some people, maybe some attorneys, but especially applicants generally, and very especially inventors, to ensure that the application makes clear how wonderful the invention is, right? These inventors really want to tell you how great their invention is, and they might want to describe particular aspects of the invention as advantageous, but the concern is that some litigation-focused people, especially U.S. attorneys, only want patents to describe products or methods, but not inventions per se, right? And these litigation-focused people are concerned that any mention of an advantage can only potentially hurt the patentee, right? This can be used by a competitor to insist that any particular implementation of the invention must carry this advantage, and therefore if this competitor can reasonably argue that their implementation does not produce that advantage, then they can make an argument that they don't infringe. Based on my experiences, I tend to take a middle view, right? Japanese applicants really want the application to describe the invention, not just a product. I think that's partly because of the patent laws. And U.S. examiners want to issue patents on inventions, not just products. And we'll also get into some legal reasons supporting this desire of the examiners on the next slide. But my point is that although we still want to retain these objects of the invention, we still want to include these advantages in our specification, we don't need the section heading. And we don't really need a particular section setting this forth if it's also included elsewhere in our specification. And so you'll find that basically all U.S. attorneys agree that this section heading should not be used. It's just a question of localization fees at that point, right? Some applicants want to enter the U.S. at a minimum cost because international patent protection can be very expensive. In that case, they might not want to pay the fees to address this. However, I think more sophisticated or higher budget clients will also try to strike this section heading, or they'll ask their attorneys to strike this section heading. Certainly translators themselves can take it out if they're more sophisticated. Moving on to the next phrase, again, we have this phrase of advantageous. Similar to what I described before, this one is a bit of a professional preference, right? Again, litigation-focused people will want to take this out. Others of us, will be more favorable on maintaining this in the specification. Again, on the next slide, we'll go into more detail. But there are arguments on both sides for keeping phrases like advantageous or advantage or benefit in your specification. お願いします。
はい。ここは、オブジェクトとアドバンテージャスについてでした。で、このオブジェクトが使われるこの発明の目的というセクションは、この MPP で必須とされていないので、基本的に米国では記載されないということでした。少なくともこの見出しは設けない方がいいということでした。で、米国出願においてこの代理人にこのセクションを削除するように依頼した場合には、費用がかかる。ここではローカリゼーション費用と言っています。このローカリゼーション費用を払うか払わないかという問題になるということです。次はこのアドバンテージャスについては、これを使いたがる人と、そうでない人がいるということでした。出願人やなどがこういう人たちで、発明がいかに素晴らしいかを記載したいと。そのためにこのアドバンテージャスといった表現を使う傾向にあると。これに対して使いたがらない人というのは、この訴訟を見据えて明細書を作成する実務家などで、この発明というものを記載するのではなく、このもの、プロダクトを記載することを好む人たちのことを言うと。でこのような人たちは、このアドバンテージャスといったこの表現は、この現代にとっても害でしかないと考えるということでした。でこれについてはブライアンさんは中間的な立場ということで、これについて次の最後のスライドで解説いただきます。でブライアンさん、お願いします。
はい。So what considerations do I recommend? From my point of view, again, I try to take a kind of middle view, and I recommend maintaining and showing the advantage in the application. Particularly in view of the Section 101 changes that we've been seeing for, 10 plus years now. I think it's pretty well established that that applicants might need this to eventually get a patent. If you need specific citations, we've got these MPEP sections here that discuss why you might want the specification to spell out these advantages. But it's not just a question of the advantages, but also how they're phrased in the specification. And so what we'll want to do is temper the description of this advantage with phrases like, some implementations can provide an advantageous effect of, right? We don't want to say, the invention provides this advantageous effect. We want to, right, because that allows our competitor to say that if they're practicing the advantage, then they must have this, if they're practicing the invention, then they must have this advantage. And so if they don't have the advantage, they don't have the invention, and they don't infringe. This gives us a little bit more room to argue with them, right? We say some implementations can. So, maybe our competitor's implementation of the invention doesn't provide this advantageous effect, but, some can, and maybe they're just, maybe their product just isn't that good, but they still infringe. That's the important part, because we still want to capture them as infringing. So again, please retain this in your specifications. You can get rid of the section heading of object of the invention, but my recommendation is to retain it in the specification rather than remove it. Again, because it makes your examiner happy, it can make your applicant and your inventors happy. And if we need to argue abstract idea type, or actually any statutory, any eligible subject matter rejection, we might want those advantages in there. You'll make your attorney happy. お願いします。
はい、この最後のスライドは、この優位な点を記載すべきかについてでした。でまずこの特に、101条の改正を考慮すると、この優位な点を記載した方がいいということでした。で具体的には、スライドに書いてある MPP のセクションで解説されているんですが、この優位な点を認識していたという証拠を明細書に残しておいた方がいいということでした。その他にデザインチョイスに関連した理由があって、単なるデザインチョイスではなく、優位な点があるんだと示した方がいいということでした。次に優位な点を記載する際に、発明の優位な点といった表現にするのではなく、本発明のいくつかの構成における優位な点といった表現にすることによって、この本発明のすべてに当てはまる優位な点ではないということを示した方がいいということでした。以上になります。質問や使ってほしいトピックなどがありましたら、YouTube のコメント欄に書いていただくか、スライド最後に記載のメールアドレスまでお気軽にご連絡ください。では本日もありがとうございました。失礼します。
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。